Hello, everyone. Welcome to Changemakers in AI. We have a great roundtable discussion for you today with guests from Microsoft, airSlate, and QorusDocs. I'm Jennifer Tomlinson, the EVP of Marketing at QorusDocs, and it's just nice to meet everyone virtually or on demand, wherever you're catching this webinar. And we're grateful to have you here because we know you have a lot of choices in your busy day, especially in the tech world. So we do hope the content that we're sharing today is going to help you in your current roles and into the future of decision making in your jobs that you have. So we look forward to sharing this discussion with you today. And before we start, just quick housekeeping. We are recording the webinar, so if you have any audio issues, you can catch it later. And then at the end of our discussion, which should be around 30 minutes, we'll take some Q&A. So if you develop any questions, just drop them into the chat, and I will pop back on my camera at the end and we'll go through some of those questions that you might have. And with that, I am gonna move us ahead here. Can everyone see slides showing up? Perfect. Okay. So what I'd love to introduce our guests today, I'm gonna have them go to a little bit more detail than I will, but we have Dr. Rashmi Misra from Microsoft, who is a general manager of our AI platforms team there at Microsoft. So she's our distinguished guest in the AI field. And then we have Scott Owen, VP of Business Development and Channels at airSlate, and our very own CEO, Ray Meering from QorusDocs. So with that, I will pop my camera off so you can see the three folks chatting and let them start to introduce themselves. Turn it over to you guys.
Very good. Well, I look forward to chatting to you guys this morning. Maybe, Rashmi, if you want to start us off with an introduction, that would be great. And then we'll move to Scott and I'll go last.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Good to meet you too, Scott. Rashmi Mishra. I head our business development function at Microsoft for AI, mixed reality, and silicon.
Very good. Thanks, Rashmi. I'm Scott Owen. I'm with airSlate, Vice President of Business Development in Channels for us, and we'll bring a little bit more detail to our offering in the e-signature space as well as in the no-code workflow automation space.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Dr. Rashmi. Great to have you both on today. My name's Ray Meering, CEO, co-founder of QorusDocs. If you've ever responded to an RFP or a security questionnaire, you know how painful those documents are to go through, and our software platform really helps you to be able to automate that process using artificial intelligence. So I'm really happy to be here today and to have this opportunity to chat to you both. Maybe we can start with a question for Dr. Rashmi. To back up and just to give our audience some context, can you talk to us a bit about how you define artificial intelligence? We know that you've worked around it for many years and it's developed into more of a mainstream science, but what's your definition for it? How is it categorized? And then also if you'll just touch into as well the difference between AI, machine learning, and mixed reality as well.
Okay, great. Good question to start with. So I guess many people have heard lots of different names that connotations of AI in terms of expert systems, data mining, neural networks, machine learning, and even things like genetic algorithms and deep reinforcement learning. And I guess what sets AI apart from, say, software is really its ability to learn from data and experiences instead of being explicitly programmed. But I guess fundamentally, it's the sort of capability for a machine to be able to perceive, learn, and essentially, I guess, reason to extend the abilities of people and organizations. So I guess it's that set of tools and approaches to help and empower, augment our own abilities in the jobs and the tasks that we do. And I guess when you look at the sort of synergies around this whole space of analytics, cognitive computing, AI, I guess in all cases, we kind of start with our core understanding of the data and the statistical sort of context of the facts that we deal with. And then you might add some sort of analytical techniques there for either discovering or interpreting or maybe even using it to communicate sort of meaningful patterns and interpretations of that data. And then as you move on, you want to add some sort of AI capabilities to show and to maybe even do some predictive or proactive behavior in there as well. And so then you start seeing a sort of subset of these technologies that come together as sort of cognitive capabilities, and where they're actually learning those capabilities in sort of structured and unstructured way from experiences and data. That's where we come upon machine learning concepts and frameworks, and deep learning, and some of those other phrases are specific examples of those machine learning methods as well. And you asked about mixed reality. So the way I look at this is, as we move across that sort of view from just specific AI capabilities to more experiences and people-centered experiences, and as we start looking at how the compute capability goes from the cloud to the edge, then actually bringing some of those experiences alive for people helps us, I guess, move from the physical reality to the sort of more digital world as well. And mixed reality sits between the sort of physical world and the digital world, bringing the two together. And you may have heard of things like augmented reality at one end, that really is an overlay onto our physical world. But then you've also got the other end, which is very much a virtual encompassing of the world. Mixed reality sits very nicely in between and allows you to bring the two of those together, so that you can enable people to do their normal day work in those sort of environments as well, that align both of those. So hopefully that gives you a view of the spectrum that we're talking about here.
That's super helpful, Rashmi. I'm curious, and I think our audience would be, can you tell us a little bit about the work you're chartered to do at Microsoft, specifically in respect to AI? And can you touch on what we've also heard is the definition of good AI versus risky AI?
Okay, so the work that I'm chartered to do, so my team and myself work very closely with partners and customers, oftentimes at the tip of the spear use cases in the industry as well. Very much across the sort of build, working with our own product teams, but also across the sort of buy, whether it's potential investment in IP and partners, or across the very large scale of partner as well. The nuance is also that I also manage a series of labs globally that help our partners and customers reduce that time to market across hardware, software, and AI as well. So really being able to compress that with skills to help them get there quicker. I guess it's been quite a while that I've worked in and around this space. I did my PhD in the 90s. And to really see this come alive as we see this sort of ubiquity of compute, the large data sets, and even better AI machine learning capabilities, and now helping our partners and customers really be able to use this in their day-to-day work, but also being able to empower their employees is really quite thrilling, actually.
Perfect. And could you touch a little bit on good AI versus risky AI? I'd love to hear a little bit of your distinction between those two.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally, first of all, it has to be AI that amplifies human ingenuity, really being able to help employees to do more, to achieve more, to learn more, and for organizations to be able to put that into their day-to-day business. In other words, really making meaningful innovation come along. So being able to use AI to put into action and connect their strategic goals with meaningful ways for that impact to happen. But also to make sure that it's really connected to their business goals, and they're really empowering the people in their organization, whether they're, data scientists and AI engineers, or whether they're IT teams or business analysts, making sure that we bring those systems to where they are to empower them. And of course, then fundamentally making sure that it's all sort of grounded in responsible AI. And we take that pretty seriously, actually. Not just by having our principles and people may be aware of them, that we really look at a practice, a system of governance across those, and making sure that those principles of fairness, that all systems treat everybody equally, but also things like reliability and safety, such that it's engineered in to the AI system. And also things like privacy, security. I mean, how are we actually helping people to engineer those concepts into what they're using, and making sure that it's actually thought of when you're building those systems. And then things like inclusivity, that it empowers everybody, depending on, irrespective of where you're actually coming to it from. And then, grounded in transparency and accountability. If you built it, be making sure that people are accountable for those as well.
Very good.
And using a governance system across that, and helping our partners to be able to design that in using tools that are available for them today. And also usage guidelines. If you use conversational AI in certain environments, it isn't a ubiquitous experience. It's not always inclusive. So making sure that we also bring those to light as well.
I really like that kind of term that you used there, Rashmi, responsible AI. It's a really nice umbrella just to capture how one could think about that. I made a note there. Just moving on, you also spoke about partners and how important partners are to Microsoft. Both airSlate and QorusDocs are Microsoft partners. And, in many ways, we look to Microsoft and to your roadmaps as an indicator of the things that we should be thinking about as we develop our businesses further and as we develop out our roadmaps. Can you share with us how Microsoft looks at AI investments? What type of capabilities are you considering in the near term and in the longer term from a roadmap point of view for Microsoft?
So I guess the guiding feature for certainly what I do on a day-to-day basis is really making sure that our partners and customers are successful in what they do, and that we're really amplifying that human ingenuity to help their employees. And it really is quite essential that that is foremost in our minds as well. And clearly a seismic shift is happening, right? You've got ubiquitous access to cloud compute now, everything as a service, and changing those customer expectations as it goes along the way as well, right? So it's driving those traditional companies that we would normally work with to rethink their business as usual. So as they move from I think from compared to 30 years ago, we certainly know that every company is a software company today. And we start seeing a shift that every company now becomes an AI company, using AI to enhance what they're doing as well. And with that sort of speed and acceleration that's happening, technology is transforming those business processes, right? Where traditional companies have to rethink, what goods and services and how they take those to market, irrespective of what those goods and services are. And, every innovation takes us one step further to those companies being AI powered as well, and making sure that they reason that those AI systems are built over coherent data, built with integrity, and being able for them then to use that data in meaningful ways, and in terms of how they engage their customers, in terms of how they empower their employees, in terms of how they make their operations more efficient, reduce cost in their environment. And the sort of nirvana oftentimes is, how do I become agile and really use that AI and capability to transform what products and services I offer as well. So really, a lot of that drives the ethos in terms of, where certainly we invest our time and resources in terms of how we make partners like yourself more productive, more efficient, I think. So, I mean, maybe it's a good time for us to interact the other way, I guess, as well. So I'd really like to understand from both of you. Maybe you can explain a bit more in the terms of the context that we've just laid out. How each of your companies views and thinks about AI here, and maybe help me understand some of the solutions that you offer today, and what you see coming along the way as well.
Yeah, you bet. Ray, do you want to go first?
You go for it, Scott. I'll take the second pass of this.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, great question. At airSlate, we are a no-code workflow automation or business automation platform, and we actually are, the reason why we call it no-code is because we deploy bots. So we actually this year are deploying an AI bot. So airSlate is essentially a data transport platform, and in the process of automating workflows, a core activity is transporting data between applications or between systems of records. And as a result, there's access to a lot of data that can be put to work for the business through AI. And I loved your terms of responsible AI, predictability, etc. So once you automate, you can more easily add the AI layer to drive business decisions based on the correlations derived from the data. So automation, when coupled with AI, we call this hyper automation, which is going to become a very, very big trend starting this year and so forth. It's about eliminating mundane tasks and truly augmenting human touches. You talked about amplifying human ingenuity. That's what we're trying to do with this AI bot. So some of the tricks in the AI hack that will be used, you mentioned some of that, natural language processing or NLP, which lets bots interpret human speech, optical character recognition, OCR, which lets bots convert images to readable text, and machine learning that you mentioned also, which lets bots identify patterns in data. So for example, we have contract negotiation in our use cases within airSlate. We can add NLP to search and flag changes in a contract or clauses that are normally sticky in the legal world, for example. So that's a quick way to say that's how we're deploying an AI bot to do those things across our offering.
Yeah.
Very insightful.
That's awesome, Scott. And we happy to be partnered with SignNow as well, so that we can combine your e-signature platform with the proposals that QorusDocs creates as well. I'll talk to one scenario. We use AI NLP across the platform, but one particular scenario for QorusDocs is the response to, let's say, a security questionnaire. And we've all faced those documents. Sometimes they come in, 300 questions, 1,000 questions, presented in Excel format, and to manually step through answering every single one of those questions is incredibly time consuming. And if you're involved in sales, that can really extend the life cycle of that sale. And that's really where AI kicks in for us, because we take each of those questions directly out of Excel in that particular example and pass that through to Azure technology to read using NLP the question and then find the best answer to that question and then automatically insert it back into the document there. So all you need to do really is highlight your 300 questions and say, go answer, and the AI and NLP kicks in at that point, finds the answers and inserts the highest probability answers into the document. Of course, it needs to be trained, and I think, Rashmi, this is where you brought in that excellent point about machines actually learning and going through the experience. So as it's answering those questions, it may get it wrong a few times initially, but you would, as a human, then interact with our application and say, that's actually a better answer to that question. And as you're indicating the better answers or adding question or adding answers or augmenting that process there, so the machine is learning in the background and getting better at answering the questions that your organization may be faced with. And so over time, that machine just gets smarter and smarter, as it were, and is able to answer those questions far more quickly, far fewer clicks, far fewer human interactions. And so you take a document that would possibly take you a day or two to answer, and you're answering that document in a minute because the AI has taken over and doing the answers there. We're really excited about the space because we just see so much potential to, Scott, as you said, automate those mundane tasks and have the machines learn through that process there. Maybe Rashmi, sorry, go ahead.
Very exciting, real empowerment for your employees, it sounds like.
Absolutely, yeah, incredibly powerful. And customers, they really, really love that capability that we have there. Maybe I can ask you another question, Rashmi. Can you share a bit with us about, what you see coming up in the near term for AI? What capabilities should we be broadly thinking about? And then if you wouldn't mind speaking specifically about things like content, documents, and workflows, things that Scott and I have mentioned that we do. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on lots of these today, right? So far, we're seeing a lot of progress in some of these single-purpose AI, as I like to refer to them, I guess, where, we recognize images better, using OCR to understand documents better, and to generate speech from there, and in many different languages as well, right? We can certainly today, our latest OCR API manages, I think, something like 73 languages, including sort of simplified traditional Chinese and Japanese and Korean and all sorts of languages as well. And it can even mix languages on the same line, so really interpret those as well as recognize handwriting, which I find really quite amazing considering, how scruffy mine can be at points. And then we start seeing sort of, places where not only is AI being used to recognize images, but also to be able to caption and tag and to apply meaningful attachments and meta context to it. And, we're beginning to see where it surpasses human ability in these spaces as well, or at least meets it in parity as well, which is pretty amazing, and adds another nuance to things like content search, content moderation, being able to manage rights if that is if you're accessing other people's documents and contexts, but also helping to discover insights. You talked about some of the legal space as well, from different file types, being able to pull in unstructured data, spoken, written, email types of data as well. And you start seeing customers and our partners really doing stringing these together into processes. So going beyond the sort of how do I understand a particular document or context, but also then looking at industry specific purposes where you might be pulling in things like receipts, invoices, expenses, even things like business cards and IDs and forms of different natures as well, and then actually pulling them together in a process. And you talked about hyper automation there, and looking at that in terms of how the importance of stringing them together into those end-to-end solutions that have some proper impact in what people are doing. And we start seeing those capabilities brought to people in that sort of low code, no code context that you talked about as well, Scott, in terms of being able to use for us, Power Automate to create those intelligent workflows where it's really adding AI from data into those processes, helping you tune those processes to areas where you might not have heard before or thought about. And then using, prediction capabilities where, a software robot can then act on those results and that process as well to complete it. And what we start seeing there then is that processes that may have had a lot of variability and dependencies on other places that weren't really suitable to the sort of rules environments become very doable in this environment, right? So then you start seeing it embeddable in places where you've got your normal processes. So for example, you might be using your sales tools through, say, a Dynamics or an Office capability, or even your sort of Dataverse capability as well. And there we see partners and customers really trying to look at, well, how can I make a difference at the operational space where data entry might have been time consuming or even error prone, and suddenly they're able to use these robotic process automations to have, you know, to streamline those operations and be able to get rid of maybe any of that error. Or if you're just having just so many different types and ranges of formats, to be able to use a process to ingest those and to automate that entry as well. And I guess, you know, being able to bring others in to be able to interpret some of that as well, and be able to apply things like sentiment and analysis into your process, or some sort of I guess detection of patterns maybe. And then you also talked about the bot. I mean, being able to apply an intelligent agent to be able to be the front end of some of these processes, I guess really starts to help you have almost a shop window to your insight that you've just created, right? So.
Yep. Yeah. No, well put, and thank you for that. I've got a question for possibly both of you. Thinking of tech stacks in B2B companies today, particularly in sales, marketing arena, what capabilities do you both think will be impacted near term by AI, and what tech should people be tuned into with respect to AI capabilities, specifically around sort of sales and the marketing arena? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so let me go first then in that case. So certainly things like what we're seeing more of, I guess, is being able to build on top of that data that you already have or you're collecting, but also be able to allow, I guess, all of those users, you know, back to the citizen developer, the business users, the business analysts, through those low code point and click type of experiences where they can actually build, I guess, custom AI views to predict what customers are going to churn, for example, or you know, automatically route customers' requests to the operational or the organization that they want to. Perhaps even simplify inventory management, you know, through sort of image processing and Power Apps being pulled together. Automating those tedious tasks that you talked about, certainly seeing a lot of that in terms of invoice processing, and then being able to extract key phrases from documents, detect those sentiments that they're seeing, and be able to use those, as well as things like customer reviews. How can we actually pass through those, take out the data, and be able to embed them into those insights that inform, I guess, the sales personnel, but again, through those no-code spaces. So really being able to say, look, I'm not a data scientist, not an AI engineer, but I really do want to embed and draw out those pieces of information, embed in my processes. So a lot of that, I think, happening, and certainly looking at those different front ends and different interfaces, maybe voice or maybe some sort of natural language interface to be able to convey that information to. Be interesting to see what you're seeing, Ray.
Yeah, you know, it aligns very much with what you've spoken about there, Rashmi, is that automation and the intelligence around recommendations and NLP, as we've discussed. For QorusDocs, we focus very much on the sales teams in our clients and on the sales operations teams. And one of the things we consistently hear is that as a salesperson, I have more content available to me than ever before, but it's still hard to find. I don't know when to use it. It's hard to personalize that content. And, you know, that's where we're seeing the application of AI also in recommending the right content at the right point in the sales cycle, and then recommending the personalization of that content. and for the machine learning again to happen to know that when that item was used, it was successful and it was under these circumstances. And so when we want to recommend a piece of content, again, in sales and marketing, those are the inputs that are driving the learning there, and it's being recommended at a future stage as well. So really teaching the machine learning what is successful content and how to use that successful content well as part of the sales cycle, and not just making this huge database of content available that some salesperson has to sift their way through, but actually having those recommendations driving through there as well. Scott, I'd be interested on your perspective on this as well, because I know that you spend a huge amount of time with sales and marketing teams as well. So how are you seeing things like guided selling or other AI technologies rolling out in your world?
Yeah, great question, Ray. So 3 areas for us that we're focused on utilizing AI is we're very front end of the sales process, lead scoring. We recognize that if you can put the right data and the right AI around the lead generation, we've got a massive SEO, SEM engine, which is great. But if you don't put applied data against that, you're challenged. So to help our SDRs or our inside sales team prioritize their follow-ups and reach outs, we've begun to apply AI to lead scoring. That's the first thing. The second one is propensity to buy. We mentioned this earlier, propensity to buy modeling as well. And for us, that's super important because we actually have 3 primary products: PDF Filler, which competes with Adobe Acrobat; Sign Now, which we're in partnership with you around our e-signature product, adding that to the proposal generation side. And then airSlate, the no-code business automation platform. We actually see a cohort uplift in cross-sell and upgrade path, but we need to put the right propensity modeling around that to know where to focus. And then lastly, mentioned just a little while ago, churn predictability. So, for us in the software business, churn predictability is pretty key. So lastly, I'd just say, what AI is bringing to the table for us, and Rashmi has talked about this, is predictability is really areas of focus for us.
Very interesting. Yeah.
And so I've got a question for you, Ray, because I know where you're focused, which is around the sales, marketing teams, et cetera. But as you begin to look at those that sort of a line of business that you're focused on, what are some of the industries that you're working with where you're seeing AI play out in the use of your offering?
Thanks, Scott. Great question. We find ourselves working very closely with professional services teams. So on the tech side, managed service providers, or on the legal side, we work with a number of law firms globally. And when you're one of those companies and you're pitching for a piece of work, it's all about the content that you pitch there. So who are the best people to work on a project? What's the best case study to give evidence that you as a firm or as a MSP have done this before? What are the most relevant awards to you winning that? And putting that all together in some kind of pitch, that can be really challenging to do that manually. It's a lot of time spent in Microsoft Word cutting and pasting, or a lot of time in PowerPoint putting together slides and worrying about how those things format together. And so for professional services industry, that's where this AI-driven platform that we provide is really, really powerful, because as you're looking to build a pitch deck for a particular project, that AI-driven recommendation engine sits behind that. And it's saying, we believe that for you to have the best probability of winning this deal, these are 3 resumes that we think that you should include in your pitch right now, and make sure that it's a diverse group of individuals going into that pitch. Here are 4 case studies that have shown in the past that they will help you to win this deal. So we recommend you use these 4 case studies in your PowerPoint deck. And by the way, don't forget about those 3 awards that your organization has won, because they directly relate to the piece of work that you're now pitching on. And we're taking inputs from the CRM system to drive that in as well, and to use that as part of the algorithms to make those decisions. So again, in a professional services environment, you're getting all of that recommendation coming in, and you're producing a PowerPoint presentation that you have a high level of confidence is going to win you that piece of business, because it's based off your success data in the past and those recommendations there. So we're really seeing that work incredibly well in a range of professional services scenarios, but just specifically MSPs and legal are 2 that we're talking a lot to right now.
Very good.
Very good. I love the way you've embedded that into your business goals to give you the best impact. It's almost like the process has been enhanced and the technology is just part and parcel of it.
Thank you, Rashmi. And you know what's interesting about it is that in the past, it was easy to run searches and to try and find these things, and maybe even to manipulate XML in the back end and do those things. But now the AI just brings this whole new element to the process. The process doesn't change, it just speeds up radically. And the predictability, Scott, and I think you mentioned that, the predictability just gets so much better. Last question for you, Rashmi, if we may. Can you give us an opinion on some ways that AI will change the world as we know it today? And maybe if you want to give an example, a B2B example or a B2C example, you know, anything that you've seen or you're excited about, we'd love to hear your perspectives on that.
That's, okay. It's a good question.
It's a big question.
Yeah. It's a big question, sure. I think when I see all I guess the enhancements, the improvements on things like, you know, all these individual core capabilities like object recognition, speech recognition, reading comprehension, translation, understanding, speech synthesis, and all the vision capabilities, and almost the merge of some of these as different modes. I think one of the most exciting aspects of this, and you know, you start seeing a little bit of a sort of fast cycle system dynamic during COVID times, for example, where we've really had to sort of move a lot of our processes, you know, online, remote. You know, I think one of the things that really has stuck out for me is how the use of AI has been used for not just the productivity that we did speak about, but also about learning and about well-being. How do I, you know, deal with the fact that we're all remote, we're isolated, we're dealing with documents and content that really feels divorced from human beings in some ways, right? So how do we bring that collaboration back in the into our everyday environment? And I think what's been you know, really heartening for me is certainly being able to look at things like, you know, immersive technologies and how they're progressing to the point where, you know, we can collaborate together, we can envision together, build realities together now, and I think we're going to probably see more and more of that. I mean, today, certainly we see things like our remote assist and our mixed reality environments coming together, you know, in a hands-free, heads-up mode, bringing together this sort of untethered capability, but being able to be applied to things like design and prototyping, remote assist, especially in those times when, you know, people couldn't go and fix their local POP but had no internet, stuff like that, where you need somebody else's capability behind you, somebody else's expertise, but you're actually being their eyes and ears in that environment. But also for training and development, how do we bring people into those environments where they can touch, feel, experience an environment, and we start seeing really good things there. For example, you know, being able to do, I did see a whole example of, you know, surgery being done in this environment, but also with other people's expertise across the globe, but also their ability to learn straight from what they're doing as well in real time. And then you see all the sort of geospatial planning capabilities there, sales assistants being able to envisage what my my new environment will look like, and certainly that sort of productivity collaboration. So I kind of feel that this is going to be, for me, one of those that really sticks out in terms of productivity, learning, and that well-being space of being able to, not just be in a digital world, but bring that digital and physical world together.
Yeah, when you think about the possibilities in this space, it's really very, very exciting. And I love that point you raised early on, is that we used to say every company's a software company. We're moving into a world, and maybe we're already there, where every company is an AI company now. Every company should be thinking about AI. So thank you so much. Such insights there, Rashmi. I really appreciate you sharing your perspectives on these points very much. Thank you.
To hear from you too as well, on the amazing things that you're doing at your company as well.
Thank you.
Awesome job, you guys. I'm sort of back on the screen. Can you hear me okay? I have a couple questions, just a couple. So we had one pop in on current trends, which I think we, talked around. He kind of came in early with that one, but I think we spoke about that with Rashmi. And then another on just comments in general on how it might change the future of work, because as we all know, we're working at home now. We've successfully figured out a way to work with the pandemic, but other ways that it might change, and maybe it's not, specifically our roles, but there's lots of places where we may see different technologies enter. So just some commentary on where you think maybe shorter term it'll change the way we work, or some other things that may happen down the road.
So, if you don't mind me, let me. I think we talked about robotic process automation, right? We talked about robotic process automation, which is really the sort of, I guess, the move from the sort of, I guess, the digitization of some of the processes that we're doing, but also improving our capability to garner those processes and to use them. I think alongside that, outside of our office space, is also a sort of reimagining of possibilities going on, enabled by edge technologies, compute capabilities. And I kind of see this as a sort of a spectrum that we've moved along from mechanized systems to automated systems, and now to autonomous systems, where we've gone from like the steam and electricity powered to software to AI, and so really enabling these devices to work alongside people to enhance their capabilities, but also provide intelligent operation in their ability to be able to sense, plan, and then to act as well. So real sort of existence in terms of how their human capabilities are enhanced there. So quite exciting there as we start enabling different industries to be able to do different aspects there as well.
That sounds awesome. I have one more that popped in, if you guys have 2 minutes.
Sure.
As content creators, what are some of the best practices, and maybe where can we find them, for preparing our content, especially things like writing narrative text to take full advantage of AI? So maybe just comments on how you all have gotten some answers in that space.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll happily jump on that one. I think that there are tools that are developing out there that are analyzing the way that we write and construct sentences and paragraphs, and are able to provide recommendations and advice on how we can do that better. I mean, if we just think about some of the new tools Microsoft's released in their Office platform that scans through and is already recommending better ways to structure sentences. But if you take that and then add to that things like sentiment analysis, well, it can start to look at the tone of the way that you're writing. If you think about writing a proposal, you want to reflect a confident, optimistic tone while you're writing that proposal. So having artificial intelligence analyze your writing style and how you're constructing your executive summary or whatever you're putting together, and recommending adjustments and changes to that process, and even down to kind of smaller tips and tricks. one of the best practices when you're writing a proposal is you always want to lead with the customer. You want to talk less about yourself and more about the customer. But having AI being able to scan those documents and really check you and say, wait a minute, you became too focused on yourself, not enough focus on the customer's need here. We recommend you change these 3 areas there. I think that that's going to be a capability that we're going to have in our hands very soon, and very exciting capability to help us write and communicate in a much better way.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I know we promised a relatively short and sweet webinar. You guys did an awesome job. Thank you to Rashmi and Ray and Scott. That was a great webinar. Lots of learnings for everybody on AI and stuff to think about. So we really appreciate your time. We appreciate everyone who made it in the door today. And we have recorded, so we've got it on demand for folks that are interested in that. So thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it. And have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Rashmi.
Thank you, Ray.
Bye,
Thank you, Ray.
everyone.
Take care. Bye now.